Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where people think they can have whatever they want and do whatever they want because they're better than everybody. And in this episode, a Karen calls 911 accusing OP of kidnapping his friend, another one attacks and steals OP's mobility scooter, and a thieving Karen convinces a cop to let her steal OP's car. It's freaking outrageous. I hope you enjoy the stories, hit subscribe if you haven't, and as always, you can send or link your crazy stories to this email right here. Let's dive in. Okay, so here's some backstory. This happened during the pandemic, and we weren't in school for a while. So my friends and I decided to go to a lake nearby to hang out and do stupid stuff. My buddies and I woke up early and hopped in my car to go to a local lake. We basically played basketball for a while, messed around with some RC cars, did some walking, and end up at like 2 p.m. having lunch. We head over to a picnic bench at the top of a big hill that has a great view of the lake. So there we are, sitting down, pulling off our masks, and we're about to start eating when a woman approaches us. The lady comes up to us and says, "Excuse me," and I turn around asking, "Hey, can I help you?" She then says, "Would you mind not sitting here today?" At that I say, what? She says, "Did you not hear me? Can you not sit here today? You're spreading your filth all over this table." That's when my friend says, "Hold up, we're just eating. If it's the gloves and masks, we're just wearing them for protection." The woman responds, "Okay, well can you still move? I'd like to eat here. I always sit here, and you don't really need to." The woman had like a frickin' mood swing, moving topics from us looking like gangsters endangering people in the park to just being an uptight snob about everything, like she knew she was better than us. My friend tells her, "Well, we were here first, but there's another bench right there if you want to use it." The woman says, "No, I want to look out over the water when I eat." I tell her, "I'm sorry, but we're not moving." The woman then storms off, and we peacefully sit and chat for the next 15 minutes when we see her and a police officer coming up the hill. That's when we look at each other and we realize that we're in a real Karen situation. When they got closer, I could see the officer's shoulders fall and his body relax, so we knew what he was thinking. The officer walks over to us and says, "Hey guys, what are y'all doing?" I tell him, "Oh, we're just having some lunch and having some fun. Is this about that woman over there?" The officer says, "Yes, I was patrolling the park and she ran up to me saying that there were gang members terrorizing the park. She said that was you guys." My friend tells him, "Yeah, no, she just made that stuff up because we didn't give up this table to her. Trust me, we're not doing anything gang-related, officer." The officer says, "Alright, well, is there anything in your bags that we need to be worried about?" My friend tells him, "Just RC cars and tools." And that's when he responds, "Okay, you guys hang tight." He then walks over to the woman, and that's when we see her lose it. She starts screaming and arguing with the officer, and then she storms away as red as a tomato. The officer came back and apologized to us for having to deal with that woman, and said she was told to stop harassing us any further. The officer left, and we enjoyed the rest of the day. It's ridiculous that we had to deal with an entitled person over a picnic bench. I would have hoped it would have been over something more exciting, but I guess I was lucky for not having too much trouble and a pretty laid-back officer to help us. Anyhow, thanks for reading. Yeah guys, I'm not surprised she went off to find an officer at that point. We all know that's a Karen's secret weapon when they don't get what they want. But if you guys have been listening to these stories, you'll know that it never ever works. And while we're on the topic of Karens calling police for the most outrageous things, strap yourselves in for this next post, guys. So I'm a 15-year-old black teen. I never in my life thought that I would have to post to this subreddit, and yet here I am. So for some context, I have a white friend. We've been friends since I was 6 years old, so we know each other pretty well. It was a great day, and we were taking a walk on a trail near the city park. It seemed like nothing was gonna happen, right? Until comes the Karen. Now, Karen thought something was wrong when she saw the sight of us. I knew she was gonna say something because the woman kept staring at us as we were talking. As soon as we get closer, she goes out of her way to ask my friend if something was wrong. Of course, my friend said no. And that's when the woman asked again, this time asking my friend if she was being told to say that. Now, I do want to say that she also had her son with her, who looked to be about 5 or 6 years old, and he was repeating everything that she was saying. I do get mad when I'm discriminated against, however, I've been raised well enough to keep my cool. Again, my friend tells her that no, she's not being told to say that. The Karen decides to ask one more time, and this time, I have to step in. I say, "Hey, why are you asking this?" The Karen stammers and says, "Well, because of your..." I then say it. I'm black. She replies, well, yes. I tell her, you really need to mind your own damn business. To which Karen says, I'm just trying to protect this girl. There was also a nice person who was listening in on this, and he was white as well. The guy chimes in and says, hey, I really don't think you should be talking to this kid like that. Karen tells him, shut up. This isn't any of your business. I'm calling the police. And that's when the woman takes out her phone and I guess dials 911. I can hear her on the phone saying, hello, I would like to report a kidnapping. So fast forward and the police show up pretty quickly. My friend explains the situation pretty well, so I'm not in trouble. The police leave a moment later with Karen in tow, and what she said next before she left honestly broke me. She looked at my friend and said, you shouldn't make friends with people like him. You know they're criminals. At this point, I'm close to crying. Now, do I feel sorry for her? If you want the answer to that question, try asking me if I should be sorry for her. You know, seeing as Karen was the one leaving with police, I think she failed to see that she's the criminal in this situation. And seriously guys, sometimes I wish random shoes would just fly at people's faces, just as they're about to say something stupid like Karen did. So OP does come back with an update though, and here it is. OP says, okay, so my family and I decided to press charges for harassment because, well, duh. We went to court a few days ago, and when the lady saw us, she went berserk, saying that she was gonna win this case, yada yada yada. So the case starts, and we explain to the judge what this lady did. They present the police call as evidence to support us, and trust me, Karen's face went redder than a bell pepper. When she finally gets her turn to speak, she immediately goes on to say that I harassed her, sexually, and she was worried about the safety of the child. My friend was also there to testify that I wouldn't let a fly touch her. And her whole family was also there, including her dad, who was the local church's bishop. So if I wasn't a good person, he wouldn't let me get near his daughter. He gave me a character witness, which was enough to prove that I was innocent. When they asked the lady for any proof, she immediately changes from her condescending tone to a shy one and says, no, but I demand he be arrested for child endangerment. The judge wasn't hearing any of her bitching, and she had to pay a hefty fine and ended up with a boatload of community service. So women with weird haircuts, if you're out there, smile. You're on Reddit. Guys, I am so glad to hear that this loony woman ended up being charged. And it amazes me that she thought she had any chance of having OP arrested and charged with anything, especially with no proof whatsoever. Sorry, Karen, not everyone is as racist as you are. Now, I've encountered a Karen as a kid once, and she was harassing someone else, but until today, never one of my own as an adult. So after fighting with disability for 15 years, I finally get a mobility scooter. It's been a godsend, and the freedom is a wonder. But as I'm sure we've all learned about from Reddit, these things are a Karen magnet, and I learned it firsthand today. And it's only my 5th time on it. So first, a quick background. My local Walmart has presently precisely 0 courtesy scooters for customers. They had 4, but all were either stolen or broken. So I'm at Walmart today just looking for a snack when suddenly I'm on the floor. It took me a moment to realize what happened as I saw a woman who I'm guessing was in her late 40s taking my bags off my scooter. That's when I shouted at her saying, hey, what the heck are you doing? At that, the woman sneers at me, and she replies that she's taking the store scooter because, quote, lazy losers like me don't need it. She, of course, was perfectly able-bodied. Now, luckily, I've read enough Karen stories by now to know that if she was stupid enough to mistake a brand new mobility scooter with my name on it for one of those cheap gray scooters with a huge shopping basket on it, there was no point in even trying to reason with her. So I just shout, security, at the top of my lungs, as the woman goes wide-eyed and she tried to get on it to drive it away. Now luckily some staff were nearby. Plus this Walmart had put up railings, so the only way to exit the store was to pass through the registers. So she had no real way to escape the store. The staff that were helping me up called security, and of course they caught her. And that's when the woman kept insisting that it was the store scooter, that I didn't need it, yada yada. I then point out where my name and number was engraved on it, but she stuck to her guns. The police were called, and after reviewing the security footage, it was clear that she flat out assaulted me to get me off the scooter. And she was of course arrested. Luckily, I think the worst I got from the fall was a bruised hip and a wrist sprain. Now, it's not the craziest story the subs ever had, but I still thought I'd share it while it's still fresh in my mind. Update. I've spoken to an RCMP officer this morning, and because they have the store security footage, I can avoid having to come to court for her assault charges if I write out a victim impact statement. So she's being charged with assault along with theft over $2,000. The US equivalent is grand larceny, I believe. Guys, all I can say is, seriously, how dumb do you have to be to throw a person off a mobility scooter and in your mind think that you'd be able to just roll away on it? And unfortunately, this isn't the first story I've read where Karen attacks someone to steal their mobility scooter, but it's the first story where OPs use the stories they've read to know to scream for security from the get-go, because you should never ever try reasoning with a Karen, because we all know they aren't capable of logical thinking, or in this Karen's case, not capable of thinking at all. Okay, so I really don't care who believes this, but here's my story. I live in one of those middle-of-nowhere desert towns where almost everyone knows almost everyone, and it's hot as hell, but dirt cheap to buy a home or land in. It's also not uncommon for old cars to last out here, as they almost never rust and people keep fixing them. After high school, I worked my ass off at a local job to get my own place. I ended up buying a small plot of land with a trailer on it off a local guy that decided he was gonna move to Texas. The guy also sold me his old Ford Escort prior to that, and it was an okay first car. It got me around well enough, and I still have it too. So 10 years have gone by since then, and for a while, I spent a lot of my time tinkering with an old 87 Monte Carlo that I bought super cheap. It was without an engine or transmission. I spent 2 years fixing it up with some friends, and finished it in 2019. Since the engine was missing, I dropped a junkyard Chevy 305 V8 into it. Then I painted it myself inside a friend's garage, and I finished it up with some good old Monte Carlo decals and some classic moon rims I bought from the local junkyard, and then polished it up. I also partially redid the interior by replacing the seats and put in a custom steering wheel. I'm not really a mechanic, but all my friends helped me. The car was fun to drive and looked good, and I kept it in good order, until this mess went down. Now, I didn't really trust some of the old local law enforcement out here, and this gave me even more reason not to. A lot of the cops around here are barely qualified for the job. They're practically hired with a handshake and told to just play Doom for training. Granted though, many of them are really nice. The sheriff's actually kind of a friend of mine. But he's really one of the only competent ones out here. Most of the rest don't do their jobs very well, especially whenever a new one gets hired on. Like the guy that went out of his way to move to my town just to be a cop. In this case, he was the nephew of the sheriff. He even bought his own Crown Victoria with a loudspeaker to drive around town in. Let's call this guy Nephew Cop, since he was the sheriff's nephew. Now, him and I didn't know each other personally yet, but I was aware of him. The guy was dumb as a rock and high on his own ego. He was a tall, strong-looking man that always gave people creepy looks and patrolled on foot up and down the main street with a clipboard in hand and a big grin on his face. The guy also liked to publicly flex his muscles in front of people. So one Saturday morning, I took my Monte Carlo out to meet a friend, but they ended up bailing because last-minute issue with their girlfriend. And I thought, meh, no problem, I'll just get some fast food and go home. I went to a burger place and got a meal to go. And as I was walking out, there was a lady outside looking over my car. Now, people would often stop and ask me about my car and where I got it, and I usually don't mind talking as long as they're polite. Though this woman ended up anything but polite. She was a curvy and good-looking girl while wearing a black miniskirt. I'm guessing early to mid-30s or so, not really sure. I asked her if she liked my car, and that's when she stood up, took one look at me, and she snickered. That's when I asked, what's so funny? Now, to get an idea of what I looked like at the time, I was a skinny guy with a scraggly beard, and I was wearing a faded AC/DC t-shirt with the sleeves ripped off, along with worn-out cut-off denim shorts and flip-flops. I guess she figured I was poor or something, so she probably judged my appearance. She looked me up and down, and in a very obvious way said, "There's no way this is your car. You couldn't possibly afford something this nice." Now, I have a tendency to get sarcastic or snide when people make assumptions about me. So I said back, "Oh really, lady? The title's in my name, and these keys right here in my hand say that I'm the owner." The Karen just glares at me as I put the keys in the lock and began to open the door. I then looked behind her and noticed a beige 90s Volvo with a missing headlight. So I put two and two together and I laughed and said, "Let me guess, lady, that's your car over there?" Hearing me say that, she turned beet red. And that's when I laughed and said, "Oh, don't be ashamed. Those things aren't lookers, but they'll run forever." I figured this was over, but as I was opening my door, I suddenly felt her nails digging into my shoulder. She was screeching so loud that my ears were hurting. And before I could turn around, she kicked me between my legs from behind with a high-heeled shoe so hard that I collapsed in agony. And true to my luck, that's when Nephew Cop drives up right beside me because he heard her screeching from down the street during his noon patrol. As soon as Nephew Cop was out of his car, the Karen runs to him crying, saying that I was a carjacker, and I was attempting to take her new car. I wasn't looking at either of them, as I was on the ground wincing in a fetal position from the pain. The next thing I hear was Nephew Cop saying, "Hey, put your hands behind your back." And that's when he pins me down with his knee on my spine, and I was forcibly cuffed. Now, I tried telling Nephew Cop that I knew his uncle, and I can prove that I'm the real owner of the car. But he called me white trash and told me to just shut up. He then picked my keys up off the ground and actually handed them to Karen. No matter what I said, the guy wasn't listening to me because he fully believed her. And then I had to see Karen start up my car and drive off with it. My heart sank as I watched it sail down the road with her flipping me off. And then Nephew Cop drags me back to the sheriff's office, and I'd hoped his uncle was in. Just my luck, he was out to lunch, so Nephew Cop puts me in a cell and told me to keep quiet. I was pissed, but I knew I wasn't gonna make my situation any better, so I just waited. And during that time, Nephew Cop just kept giving me looks of contempt. At least an hour went by, and the sheriff finally came in through the door, nursing a big gulp. He froze the second he saw me and said, "What are you doing in here?" I was about to speak when Nephew Cop jumped in and said, "I caught this low-life creep trying to steal a lady's car." So I hauled him in. That's when I finally got my chance to speak and said, "Yeah, only it was my car." Nephew Cop just rolls his eyes and said not to listen to me. But the sheriff silenced him and asked me my full story. As I tried to tell it, Nephew Cop was making dismissive looks and he kept repeatedly interrupting until the sheriff told him to sit down and to basically shut up. Then when I was able to finally say everything that happened, he was furious. The sheriff laid into Nephew Cop, asking how he could be so stupid to give my keys to a thief that had assaulted me. That's when Nephew Cop started frantically apologizing and tried to say that he was just trying to help. He said the whole department's in hot water for this unlawful arrest, and that's when I was taken home. The sheriff and Nephew Cop went back to the burger restaurant, but the Karen's car was no longer there. They got the CCTV footage and saw Karen coming back riding piggyback with a guy on a motorcycle, about half an hour from the time she left with my car. She then drove off in her Volvo. That's when the sheriff scrambled everyone to try to chase her down, but they couldn't find her, as she had already driven out of the county lines. Some phone calls were made to other departments to look for her. I had to sit at home with an ice pack on my crotch all evening, waiting for the news on what happened. A couple of days later, my car was found just a few miles out of town. The Karen had broken all the windows with what I'm assuming was a tire iron, and then put the car in neutral and let it coast down a deep, rocky hill, which rolled it into a bottom ditch, which smashed out the front and warped the frame. It was completely totaled. I wanted to cry from the sound of the metal grinding on rock as the tow truck pulled it back up. Nephew Cop was there too, and couldn't even look at me the entire time. The sheriff's office was made to pay me the value of my Monte Carlo, since Nephew Cop let it happen, which was about only $5,000. That was honestly close to what I had into it, since I did almost all the work by hand with the help of friends. The Karen was caught at a motel a state over sometime later, and she was arrested for soliciting prostitution and drug possession. Grand theft was also one of the many things she was charged with. I got on a video call just to see her in court and testify, and she looked like a wreck the whole time because she knew she was screwed. It also wasn't long before she was pronounced guilty. She got 10 years behind bars with no possibility of parole. As for Nephew Cop, the sheriff all but begged me not to sue him because he was his nephew and promised his sister he'd look out for the guy. I'm not a sue-happy person, so I let it go, provided that Nephew Cop actually takes some sort of course on how to properly do his job. The incident was more or less rug-swept, and Nephew Cop was demoted to sitting at a desk all day answering phones. The guy still avoids me anytime I'm near him. He is a better cop now though because he mellowed out. As for me, it did take some time, but with the help, I finally located a replacement Monte Carlo project car with a clean title. It was the same year too. I salvaged as many parts as I could from my old one and used it all in the new build. The engine and transmission were still good. And somehow so were most of the base parts. It did take a year, but now I've got a fresh looking Monte Carlo that looks just like my old one. You'd never know they weren't the same car. And I'll be damned if I ever let Karen near my car again. Guys, all I can say is I'm freaking speechless at what happened to OP, and my heart sank while reading this. Like, I couldn't imagine an incompetent officer just giving my keys to a complete stranger, all because they said my car belonged to them. Guys, I'd be lawyering up hardcore. But let me know what you'd do if you were in this situation, because it's absolutely ridiculous. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of r/Entitled People. If you did, hit that like button, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these wacky stories. And if you missed yesterday's episode on the channel, I'm gonna link it right here. A psycho Karen slaps a customer in a store for ignoring her and learns a super duper painful lesson that she won't forget. Guys, check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.